Hello and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for joining us in this afternoon's Facebook Live session. We know it's been a while since we've been with you on board here live on our FC Live session. So this afternoon, we're actually going to be taking a different approach from the more conventional Facebook Live sessions that you're accustomed to. Now, for those of you who've gone through our videos and the recorded content, you may actually have seen a sample of this in a previous post that we put up just a few weeks ago. And what we'll be doing this afternoon is a live version of that. So you may notice that with me this afternoon is one of my co-facilitators and friends from Franklin Covey and CLCI, Frederick Lipio, or Lippy for short. So this afternoon, what we're going to be doing is having a conversation. And that's precisely why we entitled this series or this platform as Conversations. And as a plan, we actually intend to do this semi-regularly, maybe once, twice a month. And if the response is good and it's something that you, our audience and our viewers enjoy, then we'll definitely look at doing it even more frequently. Now, the intent is to have a conversation, not just between myself and Lippy, but ideally we'd actually want to have a conversation with you, our audience here. So coming in, before I introduce the platform, maybe I should let you meet Lippy and allow Lippy to introduce himself to you, our viewers here this afternoon. So again, before I hand over to Lippy, I think I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Paolo. You may be familiar with me from previous Facebook Live sessions. If not, and if this is the first time you're joining us or seeing me on Facebook Live, my name is Paulo Reyes. I'm a facilitator and I head marketing here at Franklin Covey, Philippines, and the Center for Leadership and Change. So, Lippy, kindly introduce yourself, if you will.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to our conversation this afternoon. I'm Lippy. I'm a certified coach, certified transformative coach. I use a variety of different tools. Right? I'm also a professional certified coach with the International Coach Federation. So I'm really a coach and a facilitator. And just recently, the biggest milestone I felt I have achieved is helping my son, my 1-year-old son, walk on his own from one end of the house to another. That's a big milestone now. And so me and Pao, we have not seen any of the questions. What the team and Franklin Covey Philippines has assured us is that all of the questions and topics that will be thrown at us were real questions and topics that you guys sent in, right? And we weren't able to answer all of these questions. So we're having these conversations to have a conversation with you, right? Mm-hmm. So that we'll be able to answer all of these questions. And you know, we read every question. You know, and jokingly, we were saying that if there's a question there that started with asking for a friend, that's definitely a question that we've got to answer.
Absolutely. So, Lippy, sounds exciting. You're. When did he start walking? At what age exactly?
Around 2 weeks ago. So that's
wow.
like a year and 2 weeks. So he was standing up, then slowly just got more confidence to walk and walk.
Can't wait until you're telling me about him running around the house and you chasing after him.
I don't think it'll take that long, Pao. You know the feeling.
Oh yes, absolutely. I know the feeling. And it'll teach you a lot about running around. It will keep you active. And if you fail to have exercise days, it will give you the much needed exercise from time to time. So as Lippy mentioned, the conversation we'll be having this afternoon is we'll be tackling and we'll actually be finding and looking at questions, conversation starters that we'll be seeing for the first time on the screen. So we don't know what's going to come up exactly. We'll be waiting just as you will be waiting. And while there are some questions, some topics that are lined up, we actually will be prioritizing any questions that come up in the chat or that you bring up. So we invite you to have that conversation with us. Let us know your thoughts. Let us know your insights. If you have a question, if you have an experience that you'd like us to perhaps dive into and discuss a bit, then we'd be happy to do that. Now, the reason we thought that this format was an interesting one is that it allows you access to the facilitators. And so looking forward, you can expect that it won't just be Lippy and myself here. You can expect other facilitators to come on board, a few more of our consultants. And what that will allow for you, our audience, is it will give you different perspectives. Genuine, perhaps unfiltered perspectives that are not scripted. And I think personally there is value in that because it gives you a range of ideas, not following a standard script, not following something that's pre-thought or prepared. And it also gives you a few tips that you may be able to apply in your own lives, very practical tips. And that's something that Lippy and I will be trying to do here. Make it very practical, make it very real.
Yeah.
Move away from the more conceptual approach to the principles.
Yeah, because sometimes in our workshops, we get participants that tell us, that's really nice what you're telling us, but in the real world, or how does that work in real life? And then in my mind, I just go, so this isn't the real world, right? And this isn't the real life, you know. And what this is telling me is that sometimes what the concepts and the theories don't look real because people are not seeing it as possible or practical for them.
Right.
So that's really something that we want to share here, right? And we'd really love to get your questions, your inquiries, any perspective, anything you want to share, just put it in the chat. You know what? If I'm just thinking, Pao, I'm looking at you. So again, this is unscripted. If there's any one of you with any concern or any challenge that you would really want a free consultation, we'll zero in and help you solve it. Feel free to drop us a message and we'll invite you on this channel to speak with us next time.
That's a great idea. Yes, we can do that. So let us know. Be bold and let us know. So Lippy, what do you think? Shall we get to it?
Let's go. So let's ask our team to send us what's the first question from the friends of friends who want to know. Okay.
Best approach for hard-headed people.
So my first question here is, whose perspective?
Okay.
Right? Are we talking about how you approach? A best approach for dealing with or managing hard-headed people? Or are you the hard-headed one who's trying to figure out, yeah, what's the best approach for you? And if you are that, I applaud you, I acknowledge you because it's so difficult to acknowledge that I'm hard-headed myself. So good job there.
So Lippy, what do you think? Let's take your two perspectives. Which one would you like to tackle first if we were to spend time?
You know, let's take it. Okay, I'll take it from the experience I have with running workshops with you guys and the participants. They all usually ask this from the perspective of if I'm dealing with someone hard-headed.
Okay.
Which is in and of itself already something that I'd be curious about if I were coaching this situation. And okay, so this isn't something practical first. This is something about the mindset of how you're looking at the situation, right? Because this is you asking us, how do I deal with a hard-headed person? My curiosity is, you know, if we ask that person that you're trying to deal with, who's hard-headed, who do you think the answer will be? And I'm quite confident most of the time it won't be me. They won't say, who's hard-headed? Me, I'm the one hard-headed. Usually they'll point the finger back at you or someone else, right? So that's my first tip here. There's something that's not being understood, or maybe there are assumption or there's a judgment flying around, even with the label of a person being hard-headed.
Right.
So that's a check for us. And if a person, when you say hard-headed, that means that they're either, I'm just assuming stuff here, Pao, with a question. They're really adamant about their stand. They're strong about their opinion. They don't want to budge. They have a position they don't want to move from. And usually there's a reason for that. Right. So the first tip I'd give here is, let's try to understand the reason and give them a chance to share what that reason is. It's habit 5. So we teach 7 habits. Habit 5: seek first to understand, then to be understood. Right. So if I want to get across my message, I have to understand where's this person coming from, so that I can, I can massage, if you would, for lack of a better term, massage what I want to say, so the person also understands what I'm trying to get at. Because if I'm stuck with my mindset that this person is a hard-headed person, right, that will influence how I deal with this person. Right.
And Lippy, I like what you said there, and I absolutely agree that the application of, as you put it, habit 5, or basically listening to the other party first, is critical in this situation. I think another question I would ask is also, where is the hard, where or perhaps how is the hard-headedness coming out? Is it a matter of maybe there are two that I can think of immediately. Maybe the first one is it about not getting the results or the outcome that we expect from that person?
Yeah.
Or is it about the behavior itself? And I'll try to distinguish. So if it's about results or outcome, maybe as a, let's say I'm a boss or I'm a supervisor or even a parent, and I want, let's say as a parent, since it's something that we said earlier, we shared. Let's say the outcome is I want my son to finish his food. So the outcome is ubos yung plato niya. It's a clean plate, as we've all been taught before. And maybe we feel it's hard-headed because after every meal, it's just not finished. There are bits and pieces of rice and meat and what have you. Now, that's results. On the other hand, if it's behavior, then maybe hard-headedness might be actually going against something that we ask. So again, if we were to stick with the parental perspective here, then is it about me saying, don't do this, and my son doing exactly what I told him not to do? And I think those are two different ways of looking at or defining hard-headedness. So I think the question in my head would be, how does it come out? When we say hard-headed, is it because we're not getting what we expect as an outcome? Or is it because the person is actually behaving in a way that maybe we told them not to do? Or they're not doing what we asked them to do? So two perspectives there. And I think the reason I distinguish is because if it's about outcome, then it might beg the question, what if the person actually did put the effort in? What if the person actually, let's say my son, did eat his
or
lunch?
even what if the person didn't understand what you wanted out of that?
Perhaps expectations were not clear. Yes.
Yeah. So like just to be really blunt about it, I have a 1-year-old son. I'm sure he doesn't understand everything. I say he understands some, right? And this might happen to us. I can think if it in an office setting where I'm trying to communicate something, but the person might not be understanding, or maybe it's not really at this level or at their current level. Maybe it's not feasible. It's not something that people might be at the adequate level of skill or capability to actually deliver. So there's that. And then in our head, the danger I feel here is in my head, I've already labeled this person as a hard-headed person.
Behavior from us, whether we know it or not. We likely will treat hard-headed people differently. Like if it's an office setting or an organizational setting, we likely are more inclined to micromanage this person, or at least be extra watchful with them. And human nature being human nature, you can tell me if you agree with this or not, Lippy. My belief is the more we micromanage people, in my experience rather, the more we micromanage, the more we watch, the more we back check on people, the more likely it is that they will either deliberately find ways to be hard-headed, as we put it, or the less motivated they will actually be, genuinely motivated they will actually be to do something. They likely will comply out of fear, maybe just out of respect for authority, but there will be very little sincerity, and it's going to break down at one point.
Yeah, so again, it really depends on the situation. Another tip I want to share with everyone is if you're trying to if it's hard-headedness because of a difference of perspective, and this might happen to you. Okay, I'll put it in an example so it's a little bit more concrete. I used to have a staff who always came in late. But he would always tell me, no, he's not late.
Okay.
No, I'm not late that often, sir. but so it could be something as simple as going back to the facts.
True.
Right? And before we move on to the next question, the next topic, sometimes it's going back to what is the actual reality of the situation. Going back to what is the facts, because it could be at the end of the day, it could be because they're not understanding what is the reality, or I'm not removing the possibility that it's me who was wrong, and he's coming from the right facts, or she's coming from the right data.
Right.
So that's again something that's so if to just for me to get the same page with that staff of mine, I had the HR department pull up all the historical data of the person's attendance and show that person, you have been late X times on average every month for the past how many months. So tell me.
And I
Right?
think that brings us back to the very first point you made. Tell me, which is basically, I'd like to understand. Of course, there is likely some frustration and emotion there. But if we get across the intent and the desire to understand, then I think it allows us to get over the hard-headed hump, so to speak.
Or it's some, or it's my feeling about having to deal with this person.
Right. And it's not to say that it will entirely remove as you put it, the stubbornness or the persistence. But I think the emotional response on our end will likely be tempered a bit. There will be more understanding, maybe a bit more patience, or at the very least, on our end, there will be more ability for us to say, okay, I've been clear about what my expectations are. I've been clear about my stand on this. And the choices here are this person's then.
Yeah, yeah. Or at the very least, that you have more understanding to make a better decision.
Absolutely.
Even if the decision is at the end of the day, I'm not gonna give this job to this person. This
Right.
doesn't get it. Just give it to someone else.
Right, yes.
Right?
If at the end of the day, as you put it, the facts point to that, then I think it works out. And it will not be a rash judgment, so to speak.
Right. All right. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
So,
so what's
I think
next
we can go.
in the grab bag
yes. Our bag of questions and goodies.
that our team has so meticulously collected and prepared for us today? All right. All right. Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. So here it is.
This is an interesting one.
Getting tired of work from home. Weekends feel like
Lunch breaks.
breaks.
Wow. This
Been
feels
there.
heavy.
Been there. Been that.
Sometimes still there.
There's different perspectives for this.
Yeah.
What do you think, Pao? I want you to share first. Right?
Okay. Well, what I think here is that it's important for us to recognize and perhaps understand what it is that's making work from home so tiring. So if I were to share from my own experience, I can relate to this. Getting tired of work from home, weekends feel like lunch breaks. For me, maybe it's getting frustrated with work from home. And that's coming from the experience that it's much more difficult than I expected to manage my own time, to put my work priorities first because, and I like how one of our friends, Lippy, put it maybe over a month ago. Menen said that since we're trying to get everything done in this space that once was all about the life side of the equation, suddenly the square meters are feeling smaller and smaller because there's more that's being crammed into it. So for me, what's being crammed into it, so just to share with the rest of you, Lippy and the rest of the team heard this just before we went live. My son was banging on the door right there behind me. And that for me is a big part of the frustration and the difficulty of working from home. And the tension for me is not just the banging, it's not the noise, not just the distraction, that's all there. But the tension is really that my son is actually one of my highest priorities. So if it was really about choosing, then I would likely prioritize him if it was a choice. But then I also know that there are other priorities that need to get done. So why was that important? For me, it's important for us to recognize and understand where that frustration is coming from, because then we can ask the question, what can I do about it? What can I do about addressing this frustration? And for me, as funny as this sounds, it meant trying something out like working from the car once in a while. Telling my wife, telling my son, telling the people in the household.
That's a good tip.
I'm going outside for 2-3 hours. I'm going to sit in the car in a parking lot, as funny as it sounds. And especially nowadays that it's pretty cool, it's not very painful. This is actually a blessing when we have air-conditioned temperatures pretty much throughout the day. Then I can work in the car and it helps me get my work done. And I think from the other side, to take the perspective of my son, it removes the frustration of knowing that his father, or dada as he calls me, is here, but is locking himself in a room for a reason that if I were my son, I don't really get. Why are you hiding from me? So that's my take on it.
Tough question to answer. And Pao, I appreciate how you put it together. So for everyone's appreciation, Pao was really putting it like a framework where it would be a step by step. And if you could understand where that frustration, where that feeling is coming from, you'd be able to address it, right? I'll address it from the other end,
Sure.
From the other end of this candle. I'm not even sure if I'm getting my metaphors correctly. Basta, yun. Kabila, the other end. I would ask this person, when was the last time you took care of yourself? And I really meant took care of yourself.
Right.
right? This sounds to me possibly like burnout.
That's true.
And the person is, I also have another friend of mine, another co-FASI, one of the coaches that I work with, share with me that it's all work from home. And even though it's all work from home right now, when was the last time that you genuinely felt home from work?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right? When was the last time that you genuinely felt home from work?
Yeah.
So, I'm speaking to this person. I'm really thinking about, what can you give yourself a time and space to non-judgmentally take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Indulge in something that you find enjoyable and work your way from that. Right?
True.
Even the little things. So sometimes people, when I coach people, they look for, oh, it's a big thing. I want to, what would you find really enjoyable? I want to travel. Kamusta naman? That's not something that's really gonna work now, right? But even I had a coachee, something as small as when I do something, I reward myself by eating a choc nut, like a little peanut bar.
Chocolate.
Something as small as that, right? And work your way from that.
Right.
And to Menen's point, if everything's so constricted, everything's happening in the same space, I'm feeling the push here might be to begin to separate it.
Yeah.
Because if a weekend feels like a lunch break, then you're telling me the whole week
It's just
feels
blocked.
like just the morning and the afternoon, right? So you're not creating enough separation. Maybe it's an assumption of mine between your personal and your professional time.
Right. And I think, Lippy, if you'll allow me just to jump off from that idea, then I think it's a matter also of being clear about what are the real priorities that we can face in the present, that we can actually prioritize in the present. So, for example, Lippy mentioned travel. And I do know that some people have started to travel. I've seen some of my friends going off to Boracay. The near ones. Yes, I've seen some. I've seen some of my friends posting how they've been to perhaps nearby Tagaytay before we had the Taal acting up again, for example. So if that for you is something that is real and that to you is a high priority,
And that's
then
something
maybe that's there.
possible, right? So
Yes,
we're not saying
possible.
that it's bad to travel or what. Don't get us wrong, guys. Right? If it's possible and it's within your means and whatnot, then good. But we're also talking about the other people who are desiring to do something that's not as easily done right now.
Right. Or
There's some
perhaps
people or it's meeting friends or meeting people. Right?
yeah, right.
That's one
And
way
perhaps,
that you're able to relax.
Just to jump off on that meeting friends and people, I think, again, we can set priorities, we can set maybe boundaries. So for me, for example, because of our household and how we all live in a small space, and it really wouldn't be realistic for anyone to isolate if something, if it goes south somehow,
Yeah.
then I think for us, the meeting friends, hanging out in a bar like we used to do, maybe not so real. I miss it, yes, but in the present, maybe it's not something that is realistic yet, considering everything else. Now, on the other hand, for someone who's single and maybe feels like, I'm going mad because I'm alone the whole day, then okay, maybe if it's within your priorities, within your boundaries, then yes, consider it. Of course, do it within health and safety guidelines, of course. So I think there, I'd say also set boundaries and decide where does one thing end and where does the rest fit in. For example, many people that I know getting stressed out, you brought up the term and the reality of being burnt out. I think part of it is also because when we work from home, because of the lack of traffic, because even of the lack of the need to walk from one office to another. So for those of us who used to work in who work in big organizations, we probably didn't realize it, but part of the space was really literally physical space. From one meeting to another takes 5 minutes to walk from one conference room to the next, or to walk from your supervisor's room to the conference room. And so while, yes, we're a bit stressed out there, imagine what it feels like if all you have to do is click on the next Zoom link or the next MS Teams link. And literally, you can do that in seconds. And therefore, I think it actually stresses us out even more. And I think the challenge there is to perhaps put checks on ourselves and say, we don't need to do it just because we can. Just because we can take on 20 meetings in a day, because there's no traffic, because there's no walking from one office to the next.
No, God,
perhaps
no.
we don't need to take on those 20 meetings.
For those who have done it, and that in the start of this pandemic, I tried to do it. thinking it will
Yeah.
be easier, only to be taught the hard lesson that, hey, wait a minute, that's
Right.
it's harder. And to follow also on what you were saying, Pao, before it used to be we would commute going to the office, and we would, take a trip, commute going back home. Whatever your commute was,
Right.
right? Whatever your commute was, or whatever varying level of difficulty or length of time, that was a transition period. So that's
Yes.
one tip I want to share with you, right? As you think about it, be mindful about setting transition periods, right? Have a small ritual or what would work for you to help you start your day and to help you end your day. And even going
Yeah.
into the weekend. So one thing I do is when I'm finished with my work for the day, I take a mindful pause, take a few deep breaths, and tell myself that, all right, the laptop is going to get closed. We're ending the work, and I can go back to my family and go back to being home from work, etc., etc. A coachee of mine takes a sip of water, okay, and then tells themselves that, all right, it's going to be the weekend, etc. So being more mindful. So you're creating again that separation between work and home. Okay, so
Right.
that's my intention for you, right? And thank you for putting in this question.
I love that idea,
Don't be
Lippy.
too hard on yourself. I think that's also what I'm trying to get at here.
That's true.
Don't be
That's
too
true.
hard on yourself, right? And take the time to take care of yourself. I know that what I've experienced, Pao, is that we went into lockdown, we went into this whole shifting from physical to online space, but the expectations have not gone lower, any lower
No,
from
true.
ever since we were doing physical work setup. But that was one thing I had to learn. I had to learn not to beat myself up for not as quickly adapting, not as quickly delivering, for having to take time for myself to shift, right? To be able to transition from what I used to do into what I'm doing now. And
Right.
that's something that's my intention for this person. Learn how to see what works for you, to shift, and to create more time for yourself.
Right.
When I say
And I
more
think
time for yourself, more, really home from work. Because sometimes people think more time for myself is Netflix.
yeah.
But I'm not saying that's bad. But while I'm watching Netflix, I'm thinking about and worrying about all the next stuff that I need to do. Right?
Yeah.
Then,
And I think Lippy, maybe I'm just flipping things around here, but something you when you say home from work, it also reminded me of how another one of our friends actually told me once that this working from home has started to feel like we're living at work. And I think that is when we begin to feel that, that's a danger sign. That's a red flag. Because basically what we've done is we brought the office home
into
and we said, this is the office.
into your little
And
corner,
basically we
right?
sacrificed the home. Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm just going back. I like that idea of transitions. And if for example, you mentioned the trips, the commute, even a morning routine can be a transition because that can be the point in time when you say, okay, I'm waking up. And maybe you can even plan for the transitions. Just recently, I was listening to I was watching a YouTube video from, I think it was Mel Robbins, who suggested something like when you wake up in the morning, set your intention. Ask yourself, what am I going to do today? What's my disposition going to be today? What are the choices I'm going to make? Am I going to be grumpy? Am I going to be aggressive? Am I going to be laid back and
I love it.
chill?
It's a choice. It's a choice to be grumpy.
Exactly. And I think there we can make the choices and say, today I'm going to do blank. I'm going to finish project 1, 2, 3, perhaps. And at the same time, as you put it, I'm going to take care of myself. And I think when we make that decision, it gives us a bit more direction. It reminds us it's not just about the Zoom meetings. It's not just about the work. It's not just about the webcam and the laptop in front of us.
Yeah. Nice. So we have some comments here. So Mark, super relate on the father-son dynamics during, we miss you. Hope you guys are staying safe there in Mindanao. Be more home from work. That's a good check. Or maybe they're here. So this is how long we have not caught up with these people. Raymond, yes, one of our other co-facilitators. To travel somewhere as long as it's worth swabbing for, yes, of course. But if you must just observe health protocols and not unduly expose or spread the virus. Thanks, Raymond. Absolutely. Right. Oh,
Let's
we have
check
a comment.
Anyone else? Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. So since my setup is work from home, there's a time where I'm drained with all the activities and responsibilities, homework, online classes. I want to be organized, but sometimes there's really just not enough time, and by the end of the day, I'm super tired.
I feel you there. I feel you there. And
And we only have
if I may
you know,
jump in here.
and we only have reality. We only have 24 hours. All of us have the same 24 hours in a day. It doesn't feel so good to hear that being on the
Yes,
receiving
but
end, but it's a fact. So
it's a great equalizer.
yeah, so what am I talking about this? So before I pass this to you, Pao, what I
Go,
would
go.
look at if I'm coaching this person is I would look at your energy. It's not
Ah,
time that I think
yes,
is a concern here. It's how am I managing my energy?
absolutely. Absolutely. And since you touched on that, I don't want this to explode into an hour-long conversation on just this. But since you touch on energy, it might be worth looking into other factors. Like in one of our solutions, the 5 choices, we talk about the fifth choice, which is managing and maintaining our fuel and our energy. And here we talk about not just time management, but we actually talk about things like sleep, getting rest, relaxation, even getting some movement and exercise. And one of the things I was going to share earlier, Lippy, when you said take care of yourself, something that my wife and I have started doing semi-regularly, a few days in the week. We actually go out, have a few minutes to run. When I say a few minutes, maybe 30, 45 minutes. And what I've found personally is that really helps because it allows us to breathe. It allows me to unload the stresses of the day, whether it's work and even the kids. That, let's be honest, I love our kids to death, but they can be stressful at times when they're crying, when you don't understand what they want, when they're banging on the door. And sometimes getting away for a moment is exactly the solution to that. Because then it allows you to reset, to breathe. And when you exercise, when you get out and do a jog, it's up to you. You may bike, jog, you can even just walk around, sit outside perhaps in a safe place. That can make all the difference. And it can bring back your energy, as Lippy pointed us. So I think that's a great point, Lippy. The energy.
And and if the action is to be organized, um, I'm and going back to habit two, where you think about what is your end in mind. It's so you can go about it two ways. Either you bit by bit you can fix it, or it's not the only two ways. Let me correct myself. Let me put it this way:
Mhm.
the two ways that come to mind, right, is one, you can bit by bit shift your schedule shifting so that you're more organized. I've seen some
Right?
other coaches force the issue, like set aside an hour to get organized for the next week.
Absolutely.
um, I'm sensing there's an emotional component to this statement as well. So sa akin, again, go back to when was the last time you took care of yourself in a non-judgmental and accepting way? Because sometimes it's the taking care of myself, and I could, if I'm imagining myself in this situation, is I'm going to sleep, I'm going to binge, I'm going to eat a lot because I'm so tired, etc., etc. But it's not like recharging myself. It's more of because I'm just so drained. I just want to feel like a human being again.
Yeah.
And I just wanna, and then wake up the next morning having to repeat the whole cycle. So I wasn't really more organized, right, in that.
Right. And I
In
think,
that.
Libby, your comment reminded me of something I read recently, how there is this concept of the revenge blank, revenge sleeping late, revenge
Yeah, yeah,
doing.
yeah, yeah. I
And
haven't
the
read
idea is
about it, but what is it, Pao?
because we've been so again, working from home has taken up so much time, then some people, and sometimes I've done this myself, and when I was reading that article, I said, so is that what I'm doing? Because then it says something like, for those of you who lie in bed and instead of resting, go through YouTube, go through Netflix, and say, I'm entitled to this because I've been so stressed out. Then it becomes a revenge. But then it
It's
begs
a
the
sense of
question,
control.
on whom are you taking the revenge, right?
Yeah, that's right. I been there, been there. I mean, my hair used to be up to here until 2 weeks ago, and I used to tell myself that I just dry out my hair. But of course, I caught myself with my hair already dry, but still, let's still watch another episode. Of
Right.
course, and and,
And
and
I think,
that's again, that goes back to a sense of control, and
yes,
this is
yes,
and this is why it's helpful to really have a support group. If there's someone you can talk to, if there's someone you can open up, especially in this given this lockdown situation, that would be really helpful to you. And it's not as if you're carrying the burden all
Yeah.
alone. And that's something that I want to tell everyone who's with us and who will be watching us. Take some time. Part of taking care of yourself might be to ask for help from someone. To have
Absolutely.
someone just listen to me, and I just want to tell you about how I feel.
Yeah.
Don't underestimate the value of that.
And I think, Lippy, just jumping off from that again, going back to the asking for a friend earlier on, since my setup is work from home, there's a time when I'm drained with all the activities and responsibilities. I think one of the challenges here is that just because everything apparently fits into this box that we call home doesn't mean we have to do everything. And one step further doesn't mean we have to do everything ourselves. I think the challenge is asking ourselves, what are the one, two, three, maybe at most five most important things that I really want to get done? And to go back to something we discussed earlier, that really are possible for me to get done. And then maybe the rest become optional. They become nice to do's, or perhaps I can do tomorrow's.
Yeah.
So then at least it relieves us and leaves some space for us to re-energize, to get some rest, to take care of ourselves. Because I feel this, the work from home, the activities, the online classes. It's very tempting to say, yes, I'm going to do it all. And then you realize you're not eating lunch, you're sleeping past midnight, and that really is not a sustainable setup. Eventually, it's going to break down.
Yeah, Amanda's here sharing mental health is very important. Something that we're forgetting or deprioritizing nowadays since we're so concerned putting out fires, focusing on physical health due to pandemic, and also focusing on productivity, because by now the expectation with companies and in the workplaces, it's been a year of work from home. Surely
Been long
you
enough.
must, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, surely sanay ka na, kaya mo na to, etc. Naka-adjust ka na. But of course, that the truth is it's still something you've gotta watch out for, and so this is more of like my request to everyone watching us. Don't forget about yourself, and
Absolutely.
even even how you're thinking, and what's coming up with your heart and mind and your emotions.
And I think
Yeah.
that the mental health comment relates to something that Pauline raised here. Work from home kind of takes away from the feel of home being a safe haven. And I can understand that. And maybe one of the ways here, it's not going to be perfect, is to decide what are the signals, what are the instruments or the things that we can do to preserve that safety, or at least to allow us to go back to it within specific times. So for example, if the stress is coming from a laptop being open and having the constant question of, do I have a new email? What am I going to do about this project? Then maybe one of the things we can do is actually decide at a certain time, I'm going to close my laptop, pack it away for the day, and say, this desk is no longer my work desk from now until the end of the day. So we have different strokes and we have different realities, as you put it earlier, Lippy. Some of us have an
And
actual office.
to expand that,
Yes,
right? Not also in terms of time, but also can be, also in terms of space. So if that corner is a work corner, is there another corner in the house or somewhere where you can designate as your
right.
like little creative corner? Or it doesn't even have to be, it could be something as simple as, and this is something for me, right? If I'm facing my table right now, this is work. If I
Mhm.
have my chair turned 180 degrees and my background is folded up, that's play. That's
Right,
fun.
right,
That for me, that's
right.
like being creative, because I can put out my guitar, play with my son in the back area of this place.
So that's what you have hidden there.
No, what I have hidden here is my son's little mini ball pit place thingy that his grandma bought. Let's bring it let's bring it on the show next time. I think it'll be cute to do it from the ball pit. What am I saying?
Sure,
But yeah,
sure,
it's
sure. But I think you bring up a very good
what would
point.
really be helpful in making it.
And I think, Lippy, just to again add to something that you mentioned, you said something about even just turning around, right? Or changing your location. And I think one of the challenges that maybe many of us face is that we're still tied to the old. As much as we're saying that companies should be realistic and not expect everyone to go back to the normal or to work like we used to pre-pandemic, maybe one of the things we're missing is that we're expecting our lives our home lives to be as they were pre-pandemic. And maybe
Yeah,
that's where some of the stress is
that's a
coming
good
from.
point. Yeah.
Because things have changed. So maybe there's a way that we can come into the present and still maintain that safety, that safe haven of a home by maybe readjusting our expectations or maybe redefining what a safe space is and not
Mhm.
expecting it to be the old safe space.
Agree. Totally. And so again, the work begins with us.
Yes,
It's
it's
not
here.
like
It's internal.
it's not like the safe space just gonna magically happen. We've got to go out and claim it. You've got to
Yes.
go out and claim it. And here, let Andrew Sauce put in a really nice comment.
Right.
Sooner or later, a man or a person, if he is wise, discovers that life is a mixture of good days and bad, victory and defeat, give and take.
That's true. And I think one of the things that maybe will help here is if part of the stress of working from home is coming from expectations of the company or maybe the teams and the bosses we work with, maybe it's a matter of raising our hands and saying, "Excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm still drowning here. I haven't quite adjusted. I need a bit more space. Maybe I need some flexibility." And yes, it is scary because perhaps the fear is our boss is coming back to us and saying, "Oh, you can't hack it? Okay, then I'm sorry." But I think the reality is if we raise our hands, there probably will be, number one, more respect and more understanding there. So get over that hump of the fear and say, "This is what I'm experiencing. I need help here." Is it about time? Is it expectations? Is it space? It can be many different things, I think.
It's being proactive, and not taking a
Absolutely.
passive role in your self-care.
Yes.
Yeah. So self-care doesn't happen to me. And that was something I had to learn the hard way. It used to, you think it happens to you, but no, it's not. It's
Yes.
not happening.
It's something we do for
It's
ourselves,
something
right?
we have to do. It's something we have to claim for ourselves. Right?
Yes,
It's not like
absolutely.
and it's not, and it's not as simple as plopping down on a bed or a sofa and that's self-care. I could be lying down, but thinking about, oh my God, there's so much I didn't do today. Oh, what about this? Is still going to be an issue tomorrow. Or what about,
Right.
even, so this is the mental health aspect that we're talking about, not just physically, but in terms of our thoughts and feelings. How are we also shifting and transitioning from a work mode into a home and rest mode?
Right, right. And to your point, yes, it can be very internal. And I think that's the challenge now to make it an internal space, an internal decision, rather than waiting for the environment and everything else to signal for us that yes, now is time for play, now is time for relaxation. And is it going to be easy? No, absolutely not. I think from my experience, it's just not going to be easy. But there are things that we can do. We can take small steps. And I think that's what Lippy and I have been trying to point out here.
So you're, for those who are in this, you're not alone. We're still, we're still in this.
I feel you.
We're sharing what we found out works for us and what we've experienced, but we're not. Whatever works for you works for you. So I encourage personal experimentation, guys. If you get what I mean,
Right.
try small things and see what works for you, what works for your family, what works for you if to get the organization that you want, and eventually make weekends feel more like weekends again.
Right. And make even the weekdays feel more reasonable and feel productive and more energetic.
Oh, here's a good comment. So
From
we have
Sid,
it
from Sydney
from
Cordero.
another friend of ours, Sydney. Sydney, we should
Hello,
have
Sid.
we should have you on this show.
Let's have you on board here.
We think too much about creating the safe space by ourselves. But we share the same space with people who
Absolutely.
have different perspective standards and expectations of a safe space. So co-create the safe environment with those that is gold. See what
Yes.
Sid is saying is right. So again, ask for help from
Fantastic.
people. That's right. It's not just you alone. I do understand the need for alone time. If it's something you need to do alone, that also has to be clear to other people. That so other people know you're being
Yes.
you're having your sacred alone time and you're not shunning them away for no reason.
Right.
And involve other people as well. I mean, it's an opportunity. It can be both a challenge and opportunity
Yes.
depending on the current relationship setups or drama or lack of drama you have in your house. I don't know. But again, that's the challenge and the invitation is to really co-create that space with those who
And
we are with.
I think part of the gold here in what Sydney mentioned is that the last thing we want is for our home and the previous safe space and safety net to become part of our stress, which can very well be the case when we insist on doing everything ourselves, following only our standards, because then instead of just having to think about the work and the expectations that we have outside, then we also have these tensions at home where we're clashing heads, bumping into the people whom we should be co-creating the safe space with. So, Sydney, absolutely great comment there. Thank you.
Sabi nga ng isang fellow coach that nung nagsimula daw siya mag-work from home, mas na-miss pa daw siya ng mga anak niya.
Kasi nandun ka nakikita ka.
Exactly.
No touch
He has a sign. He has like a little sign outside his door that says like on
DNB.
air, like the studio on air, something like that. Aris, if you're listening, good job.
So I think this has been a very hot topic, I think. And I think for good reason. Because many of us, if not all of us, have been through work from home. Quite a number of us are still working from home. I think anywhere from 50 to 70% of people are still, at least majority.
It's a majority. It's still, and with our current situation, with where our locally where our country is right now, it doesn't seem to be anytime soon that we will ease restrictions and be meeting easily face to face.
And I think for good reason at this point still. That's my personal belief.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be honest, I absolutely miss face-to-face facilitation, face-to-face coaching, but if it comes at the risk of super spreading, then it's okay.
we don't want that.
Yeah.
So that's a choice, and I want to acknowledge people, thank you for choosing to keep yourselves, your families, and each other safe. That's really that's also, again, another proactive choice that we're all taking here.
Right.
To be able to maintain and keep everyone healthy.
Absolutely. We have another comment in here from Cabs Bert. I hope I'm mentioning your name or I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Bosses or corporate decision makers need to empathize with the issues arising from work from home setups of their teams and introduce counseling or coaching and discussion sessions like this. What do you think of that, Lippy?
Yeah, I think, Cabs, you can email us, loop in your boss, and we'll respond appropriately. We'll respond. Team, put in our contact email, how we can. No, kidding aside, Cabs, this is a best practice of some of the companies that I have experienced and some I've had the pleasure of working with during this pandemic period. They set up helplines. They set up a support system for their peers, for their people. They engage professionals who are able to provide the service, and and that really depends on the set of the company. But really having discussions, speaking to either a professional or professional teaching you and managers how to handle the situation, any which way that you can address this, equip people to address this or whatnot. Very, very helpful given this situation. And I think the magic word that Cabs is sharing with us here is empathize.
Yes.
It's really huge, and because I've seen some, and I'm not putting them down. It's a reality, and it's also a perspective. I know of some companies and have gotten to work with one where top management doesn't believe in a work from home setup. I don't know, maybe because of the way that their industry is, the demand, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And even if they want people, so if everyone's on a shifting schedule, skeletal force, make sure that distancing, they still make sure that people observe health protocols. They make sure that people have safe, reliable transportation to and fro. So it's a bigger demand from business owners and leaders, and at the same time, it's also so important because at the end of the day, it also supports the people who are doing the work.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying it's easy. And, Cabs, depending on the willingness of the bosses or corporate decision makers and the people, I'm not saying it's just them, to co-create the agreement, the working arrangement and what people will need, right? That takes courage and proactivity.
And I think You mentioned courage. I think, Lippy, part of it also is, to use a word that is perhaps becoming more and more cliche because of Brene Brown. It also takes a sense of vulnerability, in the sense that, you know what, I've seen very often, and I've been guilty of this myself, especially in my younger years, is when bosses and when decision makers ask, is it clear? Are there any concerns? Does anyone have anything else they want to say? And the whole room, whether it's a literal physical room or a Zoom room, just keeps quiet, or everyone says, tama naman, oo. And then, when you have, this is one of my favorites, your separate Viber groups where it's everyone except the boss. And then they begin talking about, grabe naman to. Then,
No, it's the
there's also the need.
right? Yeah.
Yes. Then let's have that meeting in the meeting. Let's have a brave soul, or at least a few brave souls, raise their hands and say, the reality is I do have a concern. I'm having a difficult time with something, or I need blank. I need someone to talk to. And sometimes it's worth doing it in the public venue, and sometimes maybe it's more appropriate to do it directly. Email, or as they say nowadays, PM is the key.
PM is the key.
Again, I say that jokingly, but it's worth raising our hands once in a while. And one of the things, I watched another video recently, and the speaker, I forget her name, and Jen Cohen, I think, she was saying something like, the secret to getting what we want, one of the first things we need to do is to ask. Say, this is what I want, or this is what I need. Because if we don't ask, or if we don't mention it, then it's difficult for others to read our minds. And it wouldn't be fair for us to assume that we didn't get it because people didn't care. So this is not to say that everything we ask for will be given. But if we don't ask, then how does anyone know what we need?
And on the other end of the spectrum, right, if I'm speaking to you guys, if you're the boss, if you're the team leader, there's also about setting up an environment that allows people to speak up.
True, yes.
Right? And right, Pao, we teach a course that's about leading the next generation. The title is Managing Millennials. But as we all know, if you're in the know, if you don't know, the millennials are now getting older. There's another newer generation,
right,
younger generation coming up. So I lovingly call it Managing the Next Generation, right? But the official title of the course is Managing Millennials. Anyway, the point here being is that if we want highly engaged, highly productive teams, one of the behaviors the manager or the leader has to do is to make sure we have a safe environment, right? So that people are able to safely voice their opinion and not let it be taken against them.
Agree.
I think that's so important, especially, and sometimes, tip, you can even go in a meeting and preface it. We can go a meeting when the official agenda is over. I have a coachee who says, all right, guys, now let's take away all that and, diba, kamustahan tayo, let's talk a little bit about ourselves muna. Or they start the meeting with that. Wag muna trabaho, tayo muna. And they set aside time, I'm investing 30 minutes here just for us to get to know each other and, check up on each other. And then let's go to the work. It really depends on you and your team. If you're the leader, surely you have some influence about that. Try to see how you can help kickstart discussions like what Cabs was saying. Discussions like this.
And maybe part of it is, again, going back to raising the hand. I think many of us are familiar with the proverbial coffee with Lippy. Let's say I'm the boss and I send out an email for Wednesday next week, coffee chat with Lippy. And previously, perhaps for those of us who are not bosses, we dreaded that because then we begin thinking, oh my, what's this coffee all about?
Oh, diba? And then the cafe, yung Starbucks, becomes the whipping place. Naku, nag-Starbucks kami, isn't like, or nag-coffee bean kami, isn't like we went out and had a nice touch. It was because my boss had to tell me something na hindi niya kaya sabihin sa office, something like that.
Right. And, part of it is maybe we can send out that invitation and say, boss, virtual coffee naman tayo. Simpleng usapan lang.
Pwede.
Doesn't have to be anything, we don't have to bring in anything absolutely heavy. We can start small. Small wins, as they say. And, one of the things we talk about in another one of our solutions, the 6 critical practices, is leaders or bosses having one-on-ones with their
that's very
people.
Important.
And I think that's important for a number of reasons. It allows for connection. And at the same time, it allows for that venue for us as supervisors and bosses to understand the people that we work with. And at the same time, it gives them the opportunity to speak up. Of course, there is that prerequisite that you mentioned, Lippy, which is it needs to be a safe space. It cannot be a space where we will, as supervisors, as leaders, throw things at them and say, "Oh, this is what you said." And if you'd like to learn more about this, you may actually want to join us. There will be a session on one-on-ones and how leaders and bosses can establish connection with their employees, their direct reports, especially in this context, on March 4. And that will be facilitated by Eric Picard. We're entitling it Different Folks, Different Strokes, and it's a simple path to engagement. So I digressed a little bit there, but the reason I felt it would be worth mentioning is that I think it touches on this, and it's one of the keys for us making work from home a productive and a positive experience rather than one that eats away at our energy and our life, so to speak.
Nice, well said. Thank you. So join if you would like to know more. We'll paste the link in the comment box.
Yeah.
Eric, we know him personally. Very cool guy. He'll be able to share a lot of stories about what works with dealing with different types of people. He's very experienced in that regard.
I agree.
All right. This was a really juicy topic, right?
Very.
I'm looking at the team just to send us if there are any questions and any other comments that we have for our ongoing conversation here.
In the meantime, I think it would be good for us to also acknowledge everyone who's on board with us here. So we have Laroa, of course. Let me know if I'm pronouncing your names correctly. Laroa S, Cabsbert, who already shared a few thoughts earlier. City, thank you for joining us again. Connie Diaz, Luis Mark Plaza, Michelle Gan, Raymond Siriaco, Amanda, Pauline Cruz, and quite a few have actually shared their thoughts. Andrew So, of course, and then Sid earlier, who mentioned that idea of co-creating the safe environment. So thank you to all of you for joining us here, and thank you for jumping in with your own thoughts. You see how it enriches the conversation all the more, and I honestly get excited when new ideas come in, and it's not just about what Lippy and I think here in isolation. Another one from Cabsbert. In Sweden, they have a word for that. It's fika. I hope I'm saying that right. Something part of the culture to link and bridge over a cup of coffee. Absolutely, and I'm a coffee lover. And I think that coffee is not just about the bitterness and the aroma. I think coffee is about the stories that go along with that cup. So I think it's the perfect place, and I think a perfect, I don't know what it is. It's a perfect situation or something to bring people together.
Bringing people together.
Yep. Especially in work from home when we are separated by the context.
Correct. Thank you. All right.
All right. Anything else?
So our team has...
Or shall we move on to the next one?
Yep.
Perhaps we have time for one more topic.
One more,
what do you think?
yes.
One more.
I think we have time for one more in our endless grab bag.
Okay. How do I ask to get considered for promotion? Full context. Paano mako-communicate na we are ready to move up, and pag nagka-opportunity, makonsider sana tayo without sounding arrogant or impatient? Siyempre, dictated by demand din naman yung promotion. Basta, nasigurado lang na maiisip kapag may opening na. And siguro maganda rin malaman kung ano pa ang kailangan ma-develop para ready na when time comes. Okay. Who shall go first?
Thank you for the full context.
Yes, very, very comprehensive.
Oo, kasi doon pa lang sa first question, how do I ask to get considered for a promotion? That is a workshop in and of itself. Let me respond first by saying this. There are two main factors I feel. Well, from what I'm reading here. One is there's a system concern, and two, there's the actual performance behavioral concern. Okay? One thing is you have to know enough about your system so that you know what are the requirements to be able to get promoted.
Right.
And let's face it, right? It's reality. There are some systems where it's more merit-based. People can get promoted within a position.
Sure.
Right? And then with rewards and responsibilities. And then there are other systems which are more position-based.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's bottom line it. I won't mince words here. Meaning you'll get promoted when the person above you retires. So you gotta know your system. Right? Why? Because here, sinabi niya, di ba, dictated by demand din naman yung promotion. Basta masigurado lang maisip kapag may opening na. That's something you have to either accept, right? Or if you can do something about it, do something about it in your
Right.
situation. Because then you could be doing all that you can to be considered for promotion. But if the person above you, all right, has no, if there's no position for you to promote into, okay, you want to stay in your department. The
Mhm.
person above you, maybe he's your direct superior, has no intention, nowhere near retiring age, and management has no plans for that person except to keep him there. It's gonna take a while.
Right.
So either you look for another department for you to move up in, or another position, right? So this is what I mean, right? You gotta know your system with what is not and what is possible.
Mhm.
Now, that having said, right, what you do have the power to focus on, right? Of course, you can influence the system a little bit, but that might take some time. What you do have more control over is your own performance behavioral factors, right? How
Right.
I show up and how I do the work, how I work with other people. Because let
Right.
me also bottom line it, diba? No, not that much, for the awareness of all the leaders and managers out there. So this person, if you're doing a really good job, but the system doesn't allow you for the promotion,
Mhm.
your skills and accomplishments can get recognized outside of your organization, meaning you can get promoted by getting hired for a better position, not where you currently are,
That's true. That's true.
right? So it's again, but if you do love the company where you are, this is a conversation to have. This is a conversation to have, because I know full well that there are people, they do want to get promoted and they do love the organization where they are in.
Right.
But if the system doesn't support that, right? So yes, talk about the system, talk about possibilities, but even before that, you gotta have your performance, solid.
And I think if I may jump in there, Lippy, I love how you set it up and how you recognize the two sides. There is the system, maybe the processes, even the needs. You know how when I was in big corporate, one of the things I often heard was business need. You know how they
Even the,
promote based on
Pao,
business need. Sorry?
even the criteria, Pao.
Yes,
For
yes.
example, you were working in corporate. Did you know what were the requirements?
Absolutely.
What boxes did you have to check to be promoted? Because I worked in a company before where the only box I had to check was my boss would love me and recommend me for the position.
So
So it can either be as, and we hope that the criteria for promotion in your place is, the what am I saying here? The more empirical, the more measurable it is, the better it is for you.
right. And I
And
think
because right? Because these
You have to
boxes
know.
yeah, correct. These boxes correspond to what it is I need to do to be able to be promoted.
And I think in relation to that, it also pays for us to have a good understanding of the position that we want to get promoted into. Now, again, there are possible ways into this. So, and I've been in both in my own experience in my younger days. The first one, and perhaps the least, I'll just call it the least mature without being insulting, is the simply, I just want to get promoted. I think I'm deserving of getting promoted because I've been working so hard, because I've been able to deliver the following, because I've been so successful. And maybe
Because si ganyan na batchmate ko does less
Pwede.
work than me, siya na-promote, bakit ako hindi na-promote? Diba?
Pwede.
Variety of different
And
reasons.
I felt that. And at times it is warranted, maybe not a promotion. And I think that's one of the things that we need to recognize there. Maybe it's not promotion. Maybe it's recognition in terms of a
Correct.
merit increase,
Correct.
in terms
Correct.
of maybe a reward. If it's not, if the company systems don't allow for the merit increase at that point. Because one thing that many people miss out on, and I missed out on this when I was younger, is that getting promoted doesn't simply mean doing a good job where we are now. Because the reality is sometimes what got you here
Yeah.
is not going to work in the next job. So for example, if the promotion means moving up to a managerial position where we are in charge of people, and we're coming from an individual contributor position, we're an analyst, we're an expert, we're a
Yeah, that's right.
specialist,
That's right.
then the skills in the next job that maybe we're aiming for are going to be entirely different. Being an expert at programming, being an expert at the job we do analysis, even as a brand manager. For example, being an expert at marketing, creating commercials, creating digital content, guiding the agency, that's very different from the requirements of perhaps someone who's going to be managing 5 people.
Yeah, that's
Because
true.
then
That's
you
that.
say it's about people development, people growth, and it's no longer about just the nitty gritty. It's about people, and it's about career pathing, for example.
It's a different. It's a totally different game, and maybe you've heard of the phrase, and maybe some of you have heard of that, right? Where sometimes we promote people to fail because
Yes,
they're
yes,
great. They're great individual contributors, but then when you give them a team, they try to still be an individual contributor, not knowing you gotta put out the results, right? In utilizing your team and people, it's not just you.
right.
It's not just you doing the work, so to speak. And this is where the 6 critical practices are. That's where our course also comes in, because it was expressly designed to teach people who would be transitioning from a individual contributor expert role into a managerial leadership role, right? And Raymond says it's a good point. Investing in yourself, you can decide if the ROI of staying company is worth your investment and time. So it's also scanning, and Pau, maybe you'd want to read. So Sydney has also dropped another
Sure.
wisdom bomb in our comment.
So
comment.
Sydney says, it's important to understand where the organization is in terms of its talent needs. Absolutely. What is the need of the organization? The easiest to know are the technical details,
Correct.
performance, vacancies, potential, and so on. But the organization needs to be adaptive, not technical, to thrive. For example, in this period of exponential change and in a volatile, so VUCA, basically, environment, the need for key talents needs to change accordingly. So the formula for talent movement cannot be the same every year. And I think that that's a very big amen there, especially in this new context. We keep calling it the new normal. Then I think it also, and I hope I'm right here in interpreting what Sydney said, it also challenges us individually and as organizations to say there are new ways of attacking things, of looking at our needs, looking at what we want. So the need for talents needs to change. So the formula for talent movement cannot be the same every year. This is the unspoken reality which every employee needs to understand. So the employee has to keep scanning the internal and external environment, including other forces that affect talent decisions. Absolutely. We cannot expect that what we saw our colleague benefit from 5 years ago will hold true today, because it's a very different environment
or
now.
even a year ago.
Right.
That
In
has
fact,
not.
if we were to just look around and if we were to see the number of senior managers and up, director level, who are below 30, in their early 30s, and compare it to even just 20 years ago when director level was for what? 40-year-olds and above.
Yeah.
That in itself is indicative of the changes that have happened. But with that, and I think it's very tempting for some of the younger people to say, well, my friend did it at 30. I want to do it at 32. You brought up the point earlier of promoting to fail. If we're not ready, if we're not equipped, if we as the person who's going after that promotion is not aware of what the demands of the next job, of the next position are going to be, then we may very well be going after our own failure. And this is not to discourage people from wanting to be promoted. It's just open our eyes, be aware to, as
And
Sydney points out, the
and
need.
in our discussion, in a way, I'm feeling we're mixing the perspectives for both company and the
Yes.
individual, right? Because it's also companies that, and this is what Sid is also telling us. The pandemic changed talent skills requirements overnight. Talent will keep changing very fast, so we need to learn fast, right? So this is from a company perspective. People are changing, people are shifting quickly. At the same time, us as companies, me as a manager, I've gotta match up to that shift so I can know how to better manage and lead, and even hire and develop the people within a company context. That being said, I wanna go into Michelle's comment, because this
Mhm.
leads me to a point I want to make for the individual. Someone shared with me before and it stuck with me. We are the captain of our own career, and we are ultimately responsible for our own actions and the direction we choose to go. Others may help us and move things, yes, but we always
Absolutely.
have a choice. Speak up about where you want to go and let your leaders give you the opportunities and equip you with what it takes to get there. So yeah, I love how Michelle's saying this.
Absolutely.
For me, how it's landing is the impact here. It's really own your career.
Yes.
If your company is not going to give you an opportunity to move up, and if you're confident, you feel you're ready to move up, this is where the internal and external environment scanning that Sid is saying, the opportunity, the promotion might not be within your own department or within your own company. It could be in another department within the company. Or if it's a company itself that's not giving the opportunity, maybe it's in another company. I don't know, right? What I do know is that at the end of the day, our career is something that we have, and we've got to own it and make choices about it.
Right. And I think one of the first choices we need to make here is, again, I'll go back to something I brought up earlier, to just raise our hand. Because sometimes, and I know people and I know myself having done this before, sometimes we expect that I feel like I deserve to be promoted. So my boss should see it too. And I keep quiet. And when it doesn't come, and another year passes and another year passes,
How
I
dare
sit
you?
there,
How
see
dare
the
he
ending.
not? How dare he
Grabe.
not realize it? How dare
Yes.
he?
And sometimes it's just a matter of raising our hands and saying, I'd like to move on to the next position. But then with that comes the question also, what will it take?
Yes. What's going to
sometimes-
be your contribution?
Right. And we need to be ready to have that hard discussion and that hard conversation where we ask, how ready do you think I am? And if, let's say, our supervisor says you're not ready, then we ask the second question. What will it take for me to be ready? Or what makes you feel I'm not yet ready? Because it may expose us to the reality that we really aren't equipped. Or perhaps if we feel we are equipped, we haven't been given the opportunity to show how equipped we are.
That's a good, having that discussion is really a great, because it will provide clarity with what is my boss looking for when it comes to promoting me. Again, guys, think about it. If you were the boss, would you promote someone who is not ready and you'll have to clean up after?
Yes.
I don't think any boss, would. So it's getting an understanding, right? Because sometimes it could be the boss that doesn't have an understanding if this person is promotable or not. But at the end of the day, having a discussion will help clarify stuff and will help, will provide you a venue to voice out, right? That, hey, and besides, what could be more motivating or challenging to have to tell your boss and have your boss watch you because you told your boss, I want to get promoted. What will it take?
Right. And I think with that point, so a few things, I'll just summarize here what I think we've been saying is, number one, bring it up. Say that I feel I want to be promoted. I feel I deserve to be promoted. And coming into that conversation, that discussion, it's probably going to be several discussions. Be ready with a number of things. What makes us feel that we're ready? What are our accomplishments? What are our aspirations even? Because it has to be clear what our aspirations are. For example, although this is probably old news, someone who wants to specialize in marketing, for example, you're probably just moving up the marketing ladder. Same for everything else, HR, sales, marketing. On the other hand, if you want to lead the company eventually, then there has to be an openness to also be moved laterally to another function.
Agree.
So for example, if I'm from marketing, I know someone who's actually been in that position. I dreaded that because I didn't want to go out on route rides.
Or supply chain or accounting or HR. You got, again, it's about having a big picture.
Exactly.
So, if I'm hearing here, I'm assuming, right? If you're saying you want to be promoted, I'm assuming it's being promoted into a management or into a leadership position. You've got to take a wider perspective.
Absolutely.
That position already.
And I think the way you put it, Lippy, is great because in reality, the higher up you go, the broader that perspective has to be. It can no longer be just about this is my job. Because the higher up you go, the more accountable, the more interested you will be in what the others are doing, what the others are contributing, and what the bigger challenges are for the organization. Now, I think Sid brings up a very valid point here. He says the pandemic changed the talent, skills, requirements overnight. And that's true. Requirements have changed overnight. The things that used to work perhaps no longer work as well.
What we took for granted back then. So back to that skill of empathy is now ever so much more in demand and so much more valued. The ability to empathize and have empathy with the people that you're working with and the people you're serving, definitely.
Right. For example, just to take it from the perspective of a salesman, for example, there are people who are good salespeople because they're great at face-to-face interaction. The firm handshake, the proximity, the willingness to be close to people that they really don't know very well, and yet to behave like they're close and they're to create
Yeah,
that bond. Now, this new setup, working from home, working through webcams, just takes that out of the picture. In fact, just a while ago, I saw one of my friends post on his, I think it was his Facebook thread. It was an old ad from, I think, Warren Buffett, who said, "When was the last time you did a firm handshake over the phone?" And of course, that was years ago. And the challenge there was, I think, the message of Warren Buffett was, you make deals, you make success face to face. And of course, nowadays, it challenges it. And I think that pretty much emphasizes the point Sydney made here, is that years ago, that made perfect sense. I would have said, yes, absolutely, face to face is the way to make an impact, is the way to do things. But right now, we don't have the handshake. We don't even have the, what was early on called the Corona elbow. Most people aren't willing to do
Corona
that
elbow.
right now.
So that's right. And and one of the things that I'm thinking, and one of the forecast, I don't know, fearless forecast, as some of my friends say, is that after this year of lockdown, work from home, right? Even after everyone has gotten vaccinated and we've solved this virus, not everything is going to go back to to what
The
was
old ways.
before, to what
Yes.
was before, definitely. So that's right. So talent has changed and the requirements have shifted, maybe even for good.
And I think, Lippy, I'll just touch on something that I know is close to both our hearts here. So Lippy and I are trained in strengths. And one of the things we say there is that one of the things we learned is that each of us has strengths. And the mix of those strengths is pretty much unique for all of us. It's almost safe to say that there's almost no one else in the world who has the same mix of strengths. And I think one of the realizations here is that together with that recognition and perhaps even that comfort in our own strengths, is we also need to have a growth mindset, which means the willingness to leverage on those strengths, to bring those strengths into play in new ways, and not to always rely on the old ways we've done things, because the strength can remain the same. Like, I can think strategically, I can be very organized, I can be a problem solver, but it doesn't always have to be the same way. We can bring those strengths and talents out in new ways, in different ways. And perhaps if there were a plus side to this pandemic, or if there were plus sides, I think that would be one of them, is that it challenges each of us to grow in that way, to know ourselves and what we can bring to the table, and to recognize that we can change, and it doesn't mean that we're any less valuable. In fact, we can make ourselves even more valuable, even more impactful, and bring bigger contributions to the table if we're
Nice.
willing to change.
Well said, Pao. Well said. Bonus na yung you're telling your children all these years after and starting your sentence with, alam mo, nung pandemic.
Hi. Well, a few comments here. Sorry, I'll just jump into the chat section here if you don't mind it.
See it.
So from Cabs Bert, working in a company that is flexible, highly responsive to changes in the environment should make one team member work in sync with changes to the job requirements. Be flexible himself in terms of adaptability to other jobs within the company. That's true. And just going back to something Lippy and I mentioned earlier, in this respect, I think conversations help greatly in terms of bringing that flexibility, bringing an understanding of both sides to the table. Because in this environment, especially since we don't see each other face to face, since we don't have the benefit of the nonverbal communications of before, where we would see how people are behaving even if they're not talking to us, it's absolutely more important to have conversations, to ask questions, and to be curious about what the other people are going through, perhaps what their expectations are, because we may be making assumptions that are way, way out of line if we don't ask the right questions.
Cabs is also sharing that promotability takes a different character now. It is even made more challenging if the company one is working with is constrained by its bottom line picture.
Absolutely.
The virtues of patience, fortitude, and creativity would help one strengthen himself to gain more ways to move up in the ladder. You know what I want to add to what Cabs is saying is that, if you promoted, you become a manager. A manager is a position, right? But you don't need the position to exercise leadership.
That's true.
In fact, it's that exercise of leadership, of influencing things for the better, of speaking up, of leading yourself first well, and being proactive with your choices. right?
That's
That
true.
will begin to get the gears turning. Besides, just to be simply practical about it, when you become a manager, leadership is the first quality and skill that will be asked of you if you want to perform
Absolutely.
well, right? So why not practice, right? And then make that as part of what you present to share and to, in a way, for the lack of a better term, to prove your promotability.
Right. And I think to jump off on that, you mentioned it's all about leadership. And I think it starts with self-leadership, as we've kept hammering on
Yeah.
throughout whole,
That's
this
the
whole
phrase.
conversation.
So the connection
Connection.
for today's afternoon, right, is about self leadership really. Whether it's about self leadership making an impact, self leadership adapting to situation, which
Right.
includes taking care of ourselves.
Right. And I think after that, or once we have that sense of self-leadership, or at least the recognition of the need for it in place, is also when we get to the external side, the organizational side, is we also need to recognize that when it comes to promotion, not only will we have maybe better benefits, more authority, more decision-making power, higher pay, but at the same time, the expectation in terms of the level of accountability increases. And sometimes that's what we miss. We
Doesn't get
feel
any
like
easier.
we
Doesn't
feel
get
like we
any
can
easier.
reason out the same way as before. We can say, you know what, I don't feel like it. The higher up you go, the smaller the space for that becomes, because the expectation of accountability becomes greater.
Higher, yeah. Well said. I mean, that's, if you think to what's the, I'm thinking of a quote. To as the movie Spider-Man,
Uh-huh.
shares forever and ever. People, sometimes I remember there was this 2-year stretch where people always say that, as it was said in the movie Spider-Man, as it was said in the movie Spider-Man. It was like the quote itself started with that, as it was said in the movie.
Right.
With great power comes great responsibility, which is really the real quote, right? Really,
Right.
for whom much is given, much is expected. And if you move up, what is given in droves is authority. The authority to make
Right.
the decisions, to make the calls, to influence people, not just on a leadership, emotional, directional level, but even on a policy, strategic, and sign the paper on the dotted line level. Right?
Right.
You have that influence when you become a man, as you move up in position.
And the flip side of that, the other edge of that is that with that authority, with that power, also comes the accountability for these people. So no longer can we say, si Lippy kasi, si Lippy yung gumawa niyan. Because eventually, it will come back and say, yes, but Lippy reports to you. And you're accountable for him. Of course, the decision was Lippy's, but the accountability, there will always be that part that will come back to us, especially if we lead people, if we're leaders of teams and organizations. Raymond says something here. We may be physically distant, but the digital workplace keeps us connected 24/7, which allows us to share thoughts, feelings, and share intention to act alone or collaborate with others. Absolutely. It takes choosing.
And Raymond, this is thank you for describing our current setup in its best version.
Mhm.
Because in its worst version is the weekends feel like lunch breaks. That's the worst version, right? It's so easy to connect with other people, which means it's so easy to send an email and expect an answer at 1 a.m. in the morning.
Mhm. Sydney has another
Even
thing here.
1 a.m., that's too extreme. Fine, let's make it a little closer to send an email and expect an answer 6:30 p.m. How's that?
That's borderline, right?
Yeah, right. But the 6:30 p.m. turns into 7, turns
Yes.
into 8, you know what I
And
mean?
if you reply at 6:30, you expect a reply at 7, then you expect
Yeah.
a reply at 7:30.
It's a vicious cycle there.
Yes. And I think there, again, we go back to the need to make choices for ourselves and lead ourselves first and foremost. Sydney has another nugget of wisdom.
Another wisdom bomb.
Lippy, would you like to?
I love the growth mindset. But some people are also fixated with growing in knowledge and skills. Yes.
Mhm.
For people, communities, organizations, and the bigger world, it is about creation of value that makes people's lives better now and in the future.
Mhm.
So leadership cannot stop at personal and interpersonal growth. I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
We need to stretch it to be able to exercise leadership, where we uplift lives of others at managerial, organization, and social levels, which you will feel if you have been on this journey or you've started this journey. It becomes a natural pull as I begin to develop more leadership over myself. The invitation is to extend and to use the leadership to positively influence other people, whether
Right.
directly or indirectly.
And I think if I were to, and I'm bringing in multiple sources or reference here, so
Yeah.
to speak, but the one closest to my mind right now is Seth Godin, where, and I'm not quoting this very precisely, but he says that really it's all about understanding what is the need, what is the value that's being asked for, and then maybe asking the question, how can I address that?
Mm.
What can I best bring to the table? Because as Sydney points out, it shouldn't just be about knowledge and skills. And Sydney, let me know if I'm extending your thought correctly here, if I'm going in an entirely different direction. But if I were to add to this, what I would say is that those knowledge, the knowledge and those skills need to go somewhere. They need to have a meaningful impact, a meaningful contribution to the organization, to the lives of people, whether it's even the people around you in your home, in order to be actually be meaningful and go beyond just here a cerebral exercise, so to speak. And I don't think there's anything wrong with the cerebral exercise. It's just that if we really want to be valuable, and if we want to, again, to go back to the question, if we want to be promotable, then we need to be able to show how what we've learned here and here brings something valuable to the table and makes it impactful.
Definitely. Nice. Thank you. And that seems to be the time that we have for today.
Well, maybe before we close, well, there's one last comment here from Raymond. Self-empowerment described by Stephen. So Stephen Arcovy here, I think, is what Raymond is talking about, or whom Raymond is talking about. Wait until told, ask for instructions, bring recommendations. I intend to do it, report, ASAP, do it, report later, do it. Eighth habit of finding your voice. Well, maybe as we close, and Louis Mark Plaza says you guys should have a podcast. What do you think about it, Lippy? Maybe it's something we can talk about
We should,
offline.
we should. I would love to listen. If it will make Mark's day, let's do it.
Let's do it, yeah.
Let's do
But
it.
yeah, so let's talk about that offline. But I think before we close, or as we close this session, maybe we can go back, and you mentioned earlier, let's make the connections. Well, maybe we don't have to go through each question one by one, but really, what's coming out for you in these questions and in the thoughts we've shared this afternoon?
It's really the reminder of habit one. It's being proactive and that we always have a choice. Because of everything, what I'm seeing as a common thread from what we've been asked is that, right, if we're making choices, proactive choices, we have a much better potential of influencing the situation and our actions to what it is that we want to get the results that we want, versus not actively making choices and then possibly not getting the results. I mean,
Right.
it's like, it's sometimes it seems so simple, but it's not as simple in practice, right? It's something like, I'll make a choice and then I get what I want. But sometimes you make a choice, you don't get what you want at first. You gotta consistently choose it,
Yes.
right?
It's a not yet.
Correct. So that's right. That's why it's not just a. If this was a cerebral exercise, all me and Pao would do is point at the camera and say, "Make a choice." It's not, sometimes not as simple as that. It's about it's mindfully making the choice every time. So you can make a choice to take care of myself, and if your little break doesn't work out how you planned, how you intended it to be, that's okay.
Mhm.
Make the same choice the next time.
Or maybe what can I do slightly differently the
Yeah.
next time to get a better result,
Mhm.
perhaps? And I think it all goes back to what Lippy and I mentioned earlier. It's really about the ability to lead ourselves. And what we mean by that is not stand by, not wait until other people recognize us, not wait until other people give us what we want. It's asking, making those choices, making decisions. Be willing to be vulnerable. And as Lippy said, be willing to maybe fail once in a while and not get exactly what we want the first try. Because I can almost guarantee you, the first try is almost always not going to be the best. It's not going to give you the best results. But if you stick to it, and if you do it mindfully, I think, mindfully with a sense of purpose, you will get there. You will get to a place that is either what you want or something that maybe you never imagined to begin with, something even better, possibly. And so I think if I were to add to that, Lippy, you mentioned being proactive, making choices.
Yeah.
I would add also having a sense of understanding of self, meaning what's important to me, what are my priorities, what is it that I want, and also at the same time having an understanding that since we don't live in a personal bubble, we also need to understand what the world expects or what the world needs and what is that value, what is that contribution that will be meaningful for us to bring to the table. Again, I'll go back to Sydney and what he said earlier. I think that was, as you put it, Lippy, it was a wisdom bomb as well.
Nice. Sydney, when are you coming on the show? And with that, guys, thank you so much for being with us this afternoon. So it was really a big pleasure to share what we're experiencing, and to also share and hear and listen your perspectives and what you're sharing with us. Right? We're both learning here, and this is what we mean by with our intention with this title of really having conversations. And
I love how it actually felt like one.
And our and the team's grab bag of questions have not gotten any smaller, even with the 1 hour, 1.5 hour that we have for this. So we can be back next time, Pao, and we'll tackle another handful of those questions.
So Michelle says these sessions ought to be continued, relevant, enlightening, lighthearted, and a good break. People need more and more these days. Thank you. And believe me, I'd love to do this again and again. So yes, we will go back to these sessions. We'll keep this alive. And as I mentioned earlier, you can expect that it won't just be Lippy and me who'll be here with you. We love doing this. I'd do it every day if we could.
We could. This is the podcast. If you love doing it, we are now backed into a corner. Thanks, man. We'll have one more next month. Stay tuned.
Yes. And we'll invite other people too. As Lippy has mentioned several times, we may actually invite Sydney. Why don't you come on board with us here next time?
Why don't you come on board with us?
And Raymond as well. And as Lippy mentioned, even those of you who are not facilitators, it would be great if you'd be willing and game to have that conversation with us. Absolutely.
Yeah, if you're willing to have a conversation with us, or there's a challenge, and let me, to be blunt about it, you want the perspective and coaching of two or more, maybe at least two consultants, licensed Covey facilitators, we're glad to have you on board.
Absolutely. And I think if anything for me, these conversations are for me real. And I think that was the whole point of us designing it this way. It's so that, to go back to our introduction earlier, it's not scripted, it's not pre-prepared. You can be guaranteed these are things that Lippy and I actually believe in ourselves. It's not something that just because we were taught or we find in a PowerPoint presentation. It's something that we've experienced, things we've tried, pains we've been through ourselves. And as we said earlier, we feel quite a bit of the pain and as one of our friends likes putting it, the hugot.
We feel you guys.
Yes, we feel you. So, Lippy, what do you think? I have absolutely enjoyed this session.
So thank you, everyone. Thanks, Pao. We'll see you guys next month.
We'll see you next month. And please do check up on the page. We'll have updates for you there. You'll be updated on the next sessions like this, the conversations. You'll also be updated on the more conventional approach to FB Live, which we also will be continuing as well.
And if whether you're watching this live or you're watching this recorded, feel free to send us your questions. Send it in the comments. If there's something that you want us to tackle, just type it in the comments or send it to us, and we'll be glad to get to it.
Right. We won't run away from them. Don't worry.
Yeah, the same way that we didn't run away from these tough questions that our team is sending at us.
Yes.
Thank you so much. And
thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for this.
We have thoroughly enjoyed this, and we do hope you will join us. For those of you who are seeing this in the recording, again, feel free to jump in on the chat, send us a private message. Let us know what you'd like us to tackle next. And as Lippy has mentioned earlier, our team, whose faces unfortunately you cannot see, but they're very, very much active in this conversation. They'll help us sift through everything and prepare everything so that the conversations remain real, and it gives the facilitators an opportunity to share their genuine, their sincere perspectives, not just on formal content, but on life experiences as well. So we hope this has been meaningful for you. Again, my name is Paolo. Lippy, I've absolutely enjoyed this. And we are, again, licensed facilitators of Franklin Covey Philippines and the Center for Leadership and Change. We invite you to have more conversations with us in the future. For now, have a good Monday afternoon. Take care, everyone, and have a great week ahead of you. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Bye.